The wedding that wasn't mine. I was 25 the day I married James Harper. 75 now, yet every time I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of church bells echoing through a sky painted with spring. The scent of lilies and white roses has never really left me. It lingers somewhere deep, like an old perfume trapped inside a silk drawer. They called it my wedding, but it never truly felt like mine. That morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of my father's house, falling across ivory curtains that looked like melting snow. My bridesmaids were laughing in the next room, champagne glasses clinking, secrets whispered behind lipstick smiles. I sat before the mirror, staring at the woman staring back. The girl who had once dreamed of Paris, of painting, of a life built on stories rather than vows. I remember the sound of my mother's footsteps. "Eleanor, darling," she said, fastening the pearl necklace around my throat. "You look like a dream." A dream, yes, but not my own. James was everything society adored. Polished, confident, the kind of man who never walked, only arrived. When he smiled, people followed. When he spoke, rooms listened. And I was the quiet harmony to his melody. At least that's what everyone told me. The church was a cathedral of light, chandeliers like frozen stars, violins whispering promises I didn't understand. I walked down the aisle with trembling hands, my veil blurring faces into ghosts of expectation. Somewhere near the front, I saw him, the man I was about to call my husband, looking perfect, certain, invincible. And in that perfection, I felt small. When the priest asked if I would take him for better or worse, I hesitated, only for a breath, maybe less. But in that breath, I saw everything, the empty evenings, the polite conversations, the slow fading of myself. Then I smiled and said, "I do." The applause thundered. Cameras flashed. I remember thinking how strange it was that happiness could sound so loud. At the reception, golden light danced across crystal glasses and laughter filled the air. James was surrounded by his business partners, his voice booming with ambition. I stood by the balcony, watching the horizon blush into dusk, holding a glass of champagne I never tasted. A soft voice came from behind me. "You don't seem like the kind who drinks to forget," a stranger said. He was the violinist from the ceremony, young, kind-eyed, with hands that looked like they belonged to poetry rather than music. I smiled faintly. "And what makes you think I have something to forget?" He tilted his head. "Because you're holding that glass like it's heavier than it looks." That sentence followed me for years. I laughed it off, of course, pretending not to understand. But when he walked away, I looked down at the glass again. The bubbles had faded, leaving only silence trapped in gold. Around me, people danced, kissed, toasted, lived. I simply stood there, a bride in a room full of strangers, realizing that sometimes you can be surrounded by love and still feel alone. James found me a few moments later, his hand firm around my waist. "Smile, Ileana," he whispered. "Everyone's watching." So I smiled, because that's what good wives do. Later that night, after the music died and the guests were gone, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in my wedding gown. The mirror across the room caught me, the same girl, now wearing a ring that glittered like a promise she didn't make. James was already asleep beside me, his breathing steady, his dreams unknown. I wanted to reach for him, but something inside stopped me, not fear, not doubt, something quieter, resignation, maybe. I looked at the untouched glass of champagne on the nightstand. It was still there, waiting, like a question. I never drank it, because deep down, I knew that glass wasn't meant for celebration. It was meant for goodbye, a quiet farewell to the woman I could have been. Now, decades later, I sit in this golden room, the same pearls resting cold against my neck, photographs of a life well-behaved surrounding me. People say I was lucky, that James Harper gave me the world. Maybe he did. But what good is the world if you lose yourself while living in it? Sometimes, late at night, I still dream of that wedding, the violins, the flowers, the strangers' words. And when I wake, I pour myself a glass of water, watch the light bend through it, and whisper to the girl I used to be, "You were right not to drink." They say marriage isn't about happiness, it's about endurance. I used to believe that meant strength. Now, I think it means forgetting who you are, quietly enough that no one notices. After the wedding, life moved fast, faster than I could catch my breath. James built his empire. Meetings, dinners, flights, and deals became his language. Our home in New York stood tall and beautiful, a place made of marble and mirrors, echoing with everything except laughter. At first, I tried to fill the silence with purpose. I painted again, cooked dinners that stayed warm long after midnight, waited by the door listening for his footsteps. Sometimes he came home with flowers, white lilies, my favorite. But after a while, I started to hate them. They reminded me of the church, the veil, the woman I left behind. He'd kiss my forehead, say, "You make everything look so effortless, Eleanor." But what he really meant was, "You make it easy for me to forget you're waiting." 5 years passed like one long season. I turned 30 and realized I hadn't written a single word, hadn't traveled, hadn't truly lived. My friends called less. I smiled less. Our love didn't die loudly. It faded like wallpaper under sunlight, peeling slowly until only memories remained. One evening, while James was away in London for a business trip, I found an old envelope in the back of my closet, unopened, yellowed with time. It was addressed to me, dated 2 weeks before our wedding. It was a job offer, the Paris Art Institute, offering me a teaching position for 1 year. My heart raced as I read it. I had completely forgotten I'd applied. Forgotten, or chosen to. My acceptance letter. My dream. Buried under a decade of silk and silence. I sat there for hours, reading the words over and over until tears blurred the ink. Then I looked around the room, the golden furniture, the chandelier, the empty bed, and wondered if this was what happily ever after meant. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. I wonder if love should feel like waiting. James returned 2 days later, smelling of airports and ambition. I told him about the letter. I don't know what I expected, maybe curiosity, maybe regret. But all he said was, "You wouldn't have liked Paris anyway. Too unpredictable." Too unpredictable. The same word he once used to describe me. We sat in silence after that, the kind that doesn't hurt, but empties you quietly, like the tide pulling sand away from under your feet. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I was drowning in a life I never chose, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled and poured him a drink. Months turned into years. James's company grew, and with it, his distance. He was always charming, always kind, just not to me. People envied us, said we were the perfect couple. They saw the photographs, not the poses. They saw the smiles, not the sighs. Sometimes, at dinner parties, I'd watch him speak, confident, admired, and I'd feel a pang of envy for the man who once looked at me the way he now looked at the world. I remember one night clearly, the night the glass returned. It was our 10th anniversary. He took me to an expensive restaurant overlooking the city. The table shimmered under candlelight, the skyline sparkling like 1,000 false stars. James raised his glass, smiling that perfect smile. To 10 years, Eleanor. I lifted mine slowly, the crystal cool against my fingers. The champagne bubbles rose and vanished, tiny, fragile, like the promises we once made. I looked at him, at the man who once made me believe in forever, and for a fleeting second, I saw the stranger from my wedding again. You're holding that glass like it's heavier than it looks. This time, I understood what he meant. I didn't drink. Again, James didn't notice. He was already taking a call. That night, I walked out onto the balcony. The air was cold, clean, the kind that stings and heals at the same time. The city lights below looked like a galaxy that refused to end. I whispered to the night, maybe love isn't supposed to hurt. Maybe it's supposed to free you. And for the first time, I realized that the woman James married, the quiet, graceful Eleanor Harper, wasn't me anymore. Something inside me was shifting. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, I began painting again. Not because I wanted him to notice, but because I needed to remember who I was before I said I do. Each brushstroke felt like breathing again. Each canvas, a rebellion in color. One afternoon, while cleaning his study, I found a letter, not from me, but from someone else. A woman named Clara. The handwriting was soft, intimate. She wrote about how much she missed him. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next day. I simply stopped waiting. Now, sitting here in my quiet golden room, I look back at that version of myself, the one who smiled at dinners, who held glasses she never drank from, who believed silence was safety. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her, love is not a cage, darling. It's a mirror. And if you can't see yourself in it anymore, it's time to walk away. But I didn't walk away, not yet. Because some stories take a lifetime to find their ending, and mine was still being written. There are moments in life when silence is louder than thunder. The day I discovered James's secret was one of them. It wasn't a grand revelation, no shouting, no broken plates, just a quiet unraveling, like a thread slipping through years of carefully stitched memories. It began on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day when the world feels too heavy to move. I was arranging flowers in the living room when the housekeeper brought me James's coat. She'd found something in the pocket. A small envelope, faded, delicate, sealed with red wax. It wasn't mine. I didn't mean to open it, but maybe I did. Maybe a part of me had been waiting for the truth to show itself. Inside was a letter, a familiar name. Clara. James. You said this life feels like a lie. That you're trapped in promises you no longer remember making. I can't keep waiting in the shadows. If you love me, meet me in Florence, where it all began. Florence, a city I'd never seen. A place he once told me was just a business trip. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, watching the rain blur the world outside the window. And suddenly, it wasn't about betrayal. It was about clarity. About finally seeing what had been in front of me all along. James didn't steal my happiness. He simply never noticed it was mine to begin with. That evening, he came home early. I'd set the dinner table as always, candles, crystal glasses, linen folded perfectly. He kissed my cheek, thanked me for waiting. The smell of rain still clung to his coat. When he sat down, I placed the letter beside his plate. He froze. Where did you find this? He asked. In your pocket, I said softly, along with everything else I've lost. For the first time in years, he looked at me, really looked at me. But not with guilt, not with love, just shock. As if he'd forgotten that I could still see him. He started to speak, excuses tumbling from his lips like coins from a broken purse. It's complicated, he said. You don't understand, Eleanor. And I smiled, a small, tired smile. No, James, I whispered. I finally do. The storm outside grew louder, wind howling against the windows like a wounded thing. Between us, the candle flickered, stretching shadows across the table. My glass sat in front of me, untouched, as always. He reached for his drink. I reached for my truth. You know, I said quietly, on our wedding night, I never drank the champagne. I held it, smiled for the cameras, and pretended I was happy. But deep down, I think I already knew. Some things aren't meant to be swallowed. They are meant to be remembered. He looked away. Eleanor, please. Don't, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You made your choice years ago. I just never made mine. The thunder rolled, a low, aching sound that seemed to come from inside me. I stood up, took my glass, and placed it gently on the table in front of him. This, I said, is everything I never said. Then I walked away. That night, I didn't cry. I packed a small bag, one I'd bought years ago but never used. Inside it, I placed a single canvas, my paintbrushes, and a postcard of Paris. The rain followed me as I stepped outside. The air smelled of endings, sharp and clean. I didn't look back at the house, or at James standing in the doorway calling my name, because I'd spent too many years answering to it. I left the city the next morning. No destination, just direction, away. Months later, I found myself in Florence. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same city where his love ended became the place where my freedom began. I rented a small apartment overlooking the Arno River. The walls were cracked, the paint peeling, but it was the first place that truly felt alive. Every morning, I painted. Every evening, I walked. The colors returned, not just to my canvas, but to me. One evening, while watching the sunset bleed across the rooftops, I realized something. I didn't hate James. I didn't even miss him. What I mourned was the woman who waited for him. The one who believed that being chosen was the same as being loved. She was gone now, and in her place stood someone quieter, stronger, freer. Years passed. James and I never spoke again. I heard he remarried once, maybe twice. I never checked. I didn't need to. Now, as I sit here at 75, in this golden room filled with the ghosts of my past, I still remember that last dinner, the candle, the letter, the glass on the table. I never drank it. But I think, in a way, that glass drank me piece by piece, year by year, until there was nothing left to pour. And yet, somehow, I survived. Because sometimes, letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about finally choosing yourself, even if it takes a lifetime. They say time heals everything. I don't believe that. Time doesn't heal, it reveals. It peels away the noise, the excuses, the half-truths, until all that's left is the quiet pulse of who you really are. It's been 47 years since the night I walked away from James Harper. Now, I sit in my sunlit room, white curtains swaying, soft piano playing somewhere in the house. I live by the sea now, where mornings smell like salt and forgiveness. People often ask me if I ever remarried. I didn't. But love, oh, love found its way back to me, just not the way anyone expected. It happened 10 years after Florence. I was in Paris, teaching art at a small institute by the river. Life had grown gentle, paint-stained hands, students with bright dreams, letters from home unopened by choice. One evening, after class, I found a small envelope on my desk. It was sealed in red wax, the same kind I once tore open in heartbreak. But this one was addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. To the woman who paints light like it's a memory. Inside, there was no name, only a short note. You once met me at your wedding. I told you your glass looked heavy. I was right, wasn't I? I hope it's lighter now. My heart stilled. It was him, the violinist, the stranger who saw me before I saw myself. I never saw him again. No address, no name. Just the echo of a sentence that had haunted and healed me both. That night, I went to a cafe near the Seine, ordered a glass of champagne, and for the first time in my life, I drank it. It didn't taste like celebration. It tasted like peace. Now, at 75, I sit by my window with that same glass, the one I kept all these years. It's cracked along the rim, fragile like memory itself. People think age makes you forget, but it doesn't. It just makes you remember differently. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start whispering, thank God it did. Because if James hadn't broken me, I might never have painted again. If I hadn't left, I might never have found Paris. And if I hadn't held that glass for so long, I might never have learned what it meant to finally take a sip. There's a knock at the door. My caretaker brings in the mail, letters, magazines, the small nothings that fill old days. But at the bottom of the stack lies one envelope, sealed in red wax. For a moment, my heart forgets it's 75. Inside is a simple card. No name, no address, just one line, written in familiar handwriting. I still remember the girl who never drank. A smile spreads across my face, not of longing, but of wonder. He's still alive. Or maybe someone found his letter. Or maybe it's just life's way of reminding me that stories never really end. They just change form. I stand, walk to the window, and pour a small glass of champagne. The sunlight bends through it, scattering into gold across the floor. I raise it gently, whispering, to the choices that broke me and the freedom they gave me. And as the waves crash beyond the balcony, I drink, slow, certain, alive. Some glasses are never meant to be drunk until the heart learns how to hold them without fear. Fade to white. The story ends not with goodbye, but with grace.